Hi, Victoria.
Hello,
How are you today?
I'm very well. Nice to see you.
Good. Now, Victoria, you're fresh off a Twitter success. You did something recently that brought the legal profession together. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, as you will have seen, we had a Twitter playlist and it's an alphabetical one. And it was a very simple premise that basically for every day, as long as it went on, I invited anyone who so chose on Twitter to put forward it became at the end up to 5 songs beginning with that letter for that particular day. And it gathered momentum, and over time, a fair amount of people joined in.
And some of us got so excited, we actually jumped the gun, didn't we?
Yes.
Mentioning no names. and I think you finally ended up with, what is it, 53 hours worth of music?
That's right. It was over 53 hours. It was 756 songs in total.
Wow. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the Tim Burgess listening party on Twitter.
I'm aware of it, yeah.
Basically, the concept is that they pick an album, it could be a classic album or a new album, and then people tweet about it, and the artist behind the album answers any questions that people might have. And I went to a live version of it last week, and what Tim Burgess said was that Twitter is so polarizing and unpleasant and hostile, 99% of the time. But this was something that really brought people together. And I know that you've got a role in well-being at the bar in one of the many hats that you wear. So can you tell us a little bit about that role and then how music fits into your own sense of well-being?
Yeah, sure. So with well-being at the bar, going back about 6 years thereabouts, there was no acknowledgement of the fact that in the profession of being at the bar, it can be quite tough. It's quite intense in particular areas such as my own family law and criminal law. You're constantly dealing with high conflict, difficult matters. And so about 6 years ago, there was a survey of all members of the bar and asking how they were finding the job. And the response was very high levels of perfectionism, high levels of stress, high levels of anxiety. And off the back of that, so a couple of people, Sam Mercer from the Bar Council, Rachel Spearing, who now heads Wellness for Law, decided to set up a proper group at the bar comprising members of different practice areas, all the ends of court, to deal with these issues and to try and actually make a difference and acknowledge that as part of our working lives, we ought to look at wellbeing. So that's broadly speaking how I got involved, because as a family barrister, I was invited to sit on this group and represent the family bar, which I did. And in due course, I became one of the heads of that committee in 2020. And in terms of the question about how that impacts on music, well, music's a release. And it's very telling that with the playlist on Twitter, a lot of people who've contributed to it are in very high conflict, to do a lot of high conflict work. Lots of them are lawyers, and it was a way, as Tim Burgess has said, for people to come together and not get immersed in all the usual nonsense of Twitter, but do something positive and exchange something nice.
You've mentioned that you're a family law practitioner. Yeah. Can you tell us something about your practice and which particular areas you specialise in?
Sure. I do mainly financial work, so finances on divorce. I also do what we call private children law cases. So that tends to deal with disputes when parties separate and they're looking at with whom their child or children should live and what time they should spend with the other parent. I also do domestic abuse work, so dealing with survivors of domestic abuse and those who are experiencing domestic abuse and how they navigate those issues as well.
Yeah. I'm also a family law barrister. I do public law, which is child protection mostly. And I know family law can be really tough on the emotions. Are there any songs that help you unwind at the end of a particularly difficult day?
Well, For me, I'd say it's more about the beginning of the day, starting the day with on a right note.
Okay.
I always start every day, especially when I have a difficult case, by listening to "Let's Go Fly a Kite" from Mary Poppins. That always
Brilliant.
sets me up for the, so that's always my first thing I listen to every day. At the end of a difficult case or a difficult day, if time permits, I might put on some loud rock, because that's a nice way of sort of releasing a bit of stress and tension after the day.
And do you dance around your room, Victoria?
Yeah, sometimes, sure.
Great. When I was a student, I used to revise with music on in the background, very low, but there almost as a sort of humming noise. But now I find that when I prepare cases, I can't listen to something with lyrics. I might listen to some classical music. What's your take on listening to music while you're working?
I'm sorry to say I'm very puritanical, because I can't concentrate and work and have the music on, because I'd want to sing along or hum along or think about the lyrics. So I'm very much, when I work, it's shutting off everything around me and just focusing on that with no distractions, if at all possible.
Sure. Music memories, Victoria. Can you remember what first got you into music? Can you remember the earliest songs that just kind of stuck in your head? Maybe and where did they come from? Was it from your family? Was it the radio, TV? Where?
I think my first music memories are listening to the band Queen.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember how or why, but I remember getting my first LP, Queen Sheer Heart Attack, and buying it from Woolworths, which is a much sadly departed store, which we all used to love, which not only sold pick and mix, but also records as well. And I remember thinking I loved Freddie Mercury as a front man. I loved his flamboyance. I just got drawn in, and I'm very eclectic in my music tastes, but that's, I'd say, the earliest memory I have.
I took part in your ABC list, and what struck me was how many lawyers, as you said earlier, just joined in, and many of them from high conflict areas of law. What did you pick up from the contributions that people made and their desire to really sort of jump ahead, as I say, to the next day and think of songs for the next letter?
I thought it was really interesting how those of us, there were lots of family practitioners on there, or people involved in family law in some way. And I thought it was so nice for us to have something to think about that wasn't about stress and about conflict and about division. And there was a lot of commonality in terms of what people chose. The certain artists emerged as ones that a lot of people really liked. There were lots of songs that a lot of people went for. So it was a really nice way to forge bonds and learn a bit more about the people who contributed as well. And it just became this really nice exercise and a nice distraction from the day job, really.
It was great, and I hope that you think of something else that we can all join in on. If you had to pitch me an album that you particularly love, and assume that I haven't heard of it or know the artists, give me your best sales pitch, Victoria.
That's a really, really hard question. But if I had to pick one and not be greedy and pick loads, I'd go for Pulp, A Different Class. It's brilliant lyrically and brilliant musically, and it's one of those albums that stands the test of time. I think it came out in '95, and it's an album where every single track on it has something to offer. With some albums you get about 2 or 3 tracks that are particularly good, but this is one where I'd say every single one on it is brilliant and very evocative. And as with all of Pulp's albums, they write on in the notes on the sleeve, "Don't read the lyrics while listening to this." But actually, lyrically, if you read them on your own, you could be forgiven for thinking it's poetry as well. but they're brilliant. They're songs about day-to-day aspects of life. They're about small details like a broken handle on the third drawer down of a dressing table, all those sorts of real precision with language. And it's an album I return to again and again, so I'd recommend that.
Well, that is a good sales pitch, because I'm not familiar with the album, and so I'm going to listen to it now. So there you go, you've done your job. And are you a fan of films as well as music?
Yes. I'm not knowledgeable about them, but I do like films, and I have some favourites, and so yeah.
Is there, sticking with the music theme for a moment, is there a particular soundtrack that you've always loved?
I really like the soundtrack for the film Trainspotting, for two reasons. Firstly, it's a really strong soundtrack, which sounds like an odd thing to say, but it really goes well with the film. It meshes with the film perfectly and is a work of art in its own right. Secondly, it really reminds me of being about 18 again when the film was out, and at that time watching it for the first time. And if you read the blurb about the film, a film about a bunch of heroin addicts, it doesn't sound like the lightest thing to go and watch at the cinema, but I think it's a tremendous film, so I'll definitely recommend its soundtrack.
I write a lot about film, as you may know, and very often there's nothing nicer than someone writing in and saying, I watched that film because you gave it such a good review. And I do a feature called Renner Recommends. So Victoria, I want you to again use your sales patter and sell me a film.
I'm going to sell Gone with the Wind.
Brilliant.
I think it's a long film, but it is, I'd say it's an iconic film. It's got the amazing Vivian Leigh in it, and she was such a charismatic, beautiful, talented actress. So to see her in that film is nothing short of amazing. It's a storyline that, if you don't know it, will have you hooked. It's beautiful in terms of costumes. From a sort of selfish point of view, in terms of interest, my best friend's great-grandfather was in it, the actor Leslie Howard. So
oh right, okay,
that's always a nice thing, because way before I knew about the film, I remember seeing Leslie Howard's portrait in my friend's house, and so I always knew him as that man in the picture. And then I saw him, and it was the first film I'd seen him in, so that was quite exciting as well. But
that's a great memory, yeah.
But it's brilliant. It's a film that if you haven't seen it, you will just be absolutely hooked. And I'm not going to spoil it, because there's nothing worse than someone spoiling a film. But watch it.
Okay. And similarly with a book that you particularly love. It doesn't have to be some unknown work. It can be a very famous book.
Okay, I'm going to go with The Secret History by Donna Tartt.
All right.
Which is a book about 6 students of ancient Greek in a very exclusive American college. And it starts off with a murder, and it sort of works back to how it got to that point, what was going on, who these people are. It's an extraordinarily clever book. It took Donna Tartt, the author, 10 years to write it. I think she wrote it in about 95 or thereabouts, 93. And I would say with certainty, it's definitely one of the best books I've ever read. I've got a real soft spot for it as well, because I'm a classicist. So a book that has references to ancient Greek, the sort of Dionysian rites of the god Dionysus, who was the god of wine and murder, sex, drugs, rock and roll, the whole lot. You couldn't ask for anything more. That book has it all.
Well, Victoria, you've been an absolutely fantastic Artful Advocate. I'm so glad you joined us, and please do some other list, whether it's films, books, music, favorite albums, whatever. It's been so popular, and it was a joy to really take part in it. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
No.
you. Well, delighted to see you. Thank you for taking part.